Good morning, ma'am. I'm Vaishnavi. I'm going to represent about nitrogen cycle and its components of nitrogen cycle and how nitrogen cycle is being allowed by different microorganisms. Nitrogen cycle is also called biogeochemical cycle that describes the transformation of nitrogen and nitrogen containing compounds in atmosphere. There are many resources of nitrogen which is available in the environment, that is from lightning, inorganic fertilizers, nitrogen fixation, animal residues, from crop residues and also other organic fertilizers. Different forms of nitrogen which is available in the environment, but most common forms of nitrogen is atmospheric nitrogen, which is also called dinitrogen. The other forms of nitrogen is urea, ammonia, ammonium, nitrate and nitrite. The ammonium is usually exist in the state of liquid or solid, but the ammonia is exist in gaseous form, and also nitrate and nitrite, which is in the form of oxidized. The role of nitrogen in the environment is nitrogen is the key nutrient element for plants. However, the abundant nitrogen in the atmosphere cannot be used directly by plants or animals. So, the plants and bacteria use nitrogen only in the form of ammonia or nitrate. It also serves as an electron acceptor in the anaerobic environment. The nitrogen is most limiting nutrient in soil. Nitrogen is the key component for proteins. Proteins are made up with amino acids and their nitrogen backbone is the main unit in the production of protein. It is important in bacterial cell wall, which is the N-acetylmuramic acid. The nitrogen cycle is a biogeochemical process through which nitrogen is converted into many forms consecutively, passing from the atmosphere to the soil to organisms and back into the atmosphere. It involves several processes such as nitrogen fixation, nitrification, denitrification or putrefaction. The nitrogen gas exists in both organic and inorganic forms. Organic nitrogen exists in living organisms and they get passed into the food chain by the consumption of other living organisms. Inorganic forms of nitrogen are found in the abundance of the atmosphere. The nitrogen is made available to the plants by symbiotic bacteria which can convert the inert oxygen into usable form such as nitrates and nitrates. Nitrogen undergoes various types of transformation to maintain the balance in the ecosystem. Furthermore, this process extends to the various biomass with the marine nitrogen cycle, one of the most complicated biogeochemical cycle. This slide represents about the whole process of nitrogen cycle. It is the initial step of nitrogen cycle. Here, the atmospheric nitrogen, which is primarily available in the inert form, is converted into the usable form of ammonia. During the process of nitrogen fixation, the inert form of nitrogen gas is deposited into the soil from the atmosphere and surface waters, mainly through precipitation. The entire process of nitrogen fixation is completely by symbiotic bacteria, which are known as Acetobacter and Rhizobium, also have the major role in this process. These bacteria consist of nitrogenase enzyme, which has the capability to combine gaseous nitrogen with the hydrogen to form ammonia. Nitrogen fixation can occur either by atmospheric fixation, which involves lightning, or industrial fixation by manufacturing ammonia under high temperature and pressure conditions. These can also be fixed through man-made processes, which is primarily industrial process that create ammonia and nitrogen-rich fertilizers. This slide represents about ammonifications. When plants or animals die, the nitrogen present in the organic matter is released back into the soil. The decomposers, namely bacteria or fungi present in the soil, convert the organic matter back into the ammonium. This process of decomposition produces ammonia, which is further used for the biological process. Ammonification process means the conversion of organic nitrogen into inorganic nitrogen. This ammonia will stay as a gaseous form while pH is higher than 7.5. If the pH is lower than 7.5, this ammonium will stay, the gaseous ammonium will turn into the ammonium ions. Coming to the immobilization. Immobilization process completely the opposite step of ammonification. What makes this step? The ratio of carbon and nitrogen, which is 25:1, which is higher than 25:1, that is favor for immobilization process, and if the ratio is lower than 25:1, that they favor for mineralization process. Nitrogen fixation process, there are three different fixation is there. One is atmospheric fixation, and another one is industrial fixation and biological fixation. Coming to the atmospheric fixation, that is a natural phenomenon where the energy of lightning breaks the nitrogen into nitrogen oxides, which they used by plants. In industrial fixation, it is a man-made alternative that aids in the nitrogen fixation by the use of ammonia. Ammonia is produced by the direct combination of nitrogen and hydrogen. Later, it is converted into the various fertilizers such as urea. For biological fixation, that is directly by the plants and animals, and also bacteria takes a place. That is rhizobium and blue-green algae transform the unusable form of nitrogen into other components that are more readily usable. These nitrogen compounds get fixed in the soil by many microbes. Nitrogen fixation is highly energy intensive process which requires almost 16 ATP for this process. Only selected bacteria and actinomyces participate the role of nitrogen fixation. For example, this is soybean in the soil. Microorganisms are Acetobacter, Azospirillum, Clostridium and Cyanobacteria and Rhizobium, which require the enzyme of nitrogenase. It's inhibited by the oxygen and also inhibited by the ammonia because ammonia is the end product. Coming to the nitrification, the ammonia is converted into the nitrate by the presence of bacteria in the soil. Nitrates are formed by the oxidation of ammonia with the help of Nitrosomonas bacteria species. Later, the produced nitrates are converted into nitrates by Nitrobacter. This conversion is very important as ammonia gas is toxic for plants. It is a two-step process. The first step catalyzed by the Nitrosomonas and second step catalyzed by the Nitrobacter. For this process, the optimal pH is between 6.6 and 8.8 to 8.0 is required. If the pH is lower than 6.0, the rate will be slower. If the pH is lower than 4.5, the reaction will completely inhibited. And coming to the denitrification process, the denitrification process in which the nitrogen compounds make their way back to the atmosphere by converting nitrate into the gaseous nitrogen. This process of nitrogen cycle is the final stage of process, and it occurs in the absence of oxygen. The denitrification is carried out by the denitrified bacterial species, which is Clostridium and Pseudomonas. This process will make the nitrate to gain oxygen and gives out free nitrogen gas as a byproduct. It requires most of the microbial reaction, and also nitrates acting as a terminal electron acceptor. The importance of nitrogen cycle is helps the plant to synthesize chlorophyll from the nitrogen compounds, and also helps in the converting of inert nitrogen gas into the usable form of the plants through the biochemical processes. In this process of ammonification, the bacteria help into the decomposing the animal and plant matter, which indirectly helps to the clean up the environment. Nitrates and nitrates are released into the soil, which helps in enriching the soil with the necessary nutrients required for the cultivation. And also, nitrogen is an integral component of the cell, and it forms many crucial compounds and important for the biochemical molecules. And finally, nitrogen is abundant in the atmosphere, but it's usable to the plants but it's unusable to the plants and animals unless it's converted into the nitrogen compounds. Nitrogen fixing bacteria play a crucial role in fixing atmospheric nitrogen into nitrogen compounds that can be used by plants. The plants absorbs the usable nitrogen compounds from the soil through their roots. Then these nitrogen compounds are used for the production of proteins and other compounds in the plant cell. Animals assimilate nitrogen by consuming these plants or other animals that contain nitrogen. Humans consume proteins from these plants and animals. The nitrogen then assimilates into our body system. During the final stage of nitrogen cycle, bacteria and fungi helps in the decompose of organic matter where the nitrogen compounds get dissolved in the soil, which is again used by the plants. Some bacteria then convert these nitrogen compounds in the soil and in turn into the nitrogen gas. Eventually, it goes back to the atmosphere. These sets of processes repeat continuously and thus maintain the percentage of nitrogen in the atmosphere. And why is the nitrogen important for life? Nitrogen constitutes many cellular components and it's essential in many biological processes. For instance, the amino acids contain nitrogen and form building blocks that makes up various components of the human body such as hair and tissues and muscles. Why do plants need nitrogen? Plants need nitrogen as the element is an important component of chlorophyll. Consequently, chlorophyll is vital for the process of photosynthesis, so lack of nitrogen can cause deficiency disorders such as stunt growth and other abnormalities. The different steps of nitrogen cycle is nitrogen fixation, assimilation, ammonification, nitrification and denitrification. The function of nitrifying bacteria is the small group of aerobic bacteria which are mainly involved in the conservation of ammonia into nitrates. The process of nitrogen fixation is carried out naturally in the soil with a nodule in the plant root systems.